Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. Today, we're really peeling back the layers on HR tech. We want to uncover some of the fundamental ideas, the concepts that make these complex systems, well, work. Our source material, maybe surprisingly, comes from an exam guide. But honestly, don't think of it like a test prep session. It's more like a fascinating lens, a way to look into the core mechanics of how modern HR data and processes are actually managed.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the source is technically excerpts from the guide for the CTHR 81-2505 exam. The details, 80 questions, 180 minutes, 69% to pass, English only. But like you said, that's not really the point for us today. The principles behind those questions, they are absolutely crucial, really vital for anyone navigating or designing or just managing these big enterprise HR systems. Doesn't matter if you're taking the exam or not. It's about getting the logic, the foundation that powers everything.
Exactly. So our mission, if you will, is to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the real insights from these practical questions. We're kind of offering a shortcut here, helping you understand some pretty complex stuff, and maybe reveal a few surprising things about how HR data actually works behind the scenes. Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's dive right into maybe the most basic thing, how these systems keep a history, like a living record of you and the company. Have you ever stopped to think how it knows, what your job title was last year versus today? That brings us to effective dated data.
Oh yes, effective dating. It's definitely a cornerstone.
Yeah.
Basically, this effective dated attribute lets the system keep multiple records for the same piece of data over time. Each record gets its own specific start date. And this isn't just like a technical detail, it's crucial. It builds that complete historical timeline. Think about job changes, salary bumps, promotions, all tracked meticulously with an effective date. And that's not just for audits, it's the foundation for, well, powerful HR analytics. Imagine trying to spot trends in retention or salary if you only had today's snapshot. It wouldn't work. Effective dating really turns that raw data into something you can use.
That's fascinating. So it's building this digital history book for every little change. But, thinking about it, not everything needs that full history, right? Like my emergency contact for 3 years ago, probably not relevant now. I just need the current one. Does the system know the difference? Or is everything treated the same way?
That's a really good point. And no, it's definitely not one size fits all. The system is designed to differentiate. So some standard employee data fields, national ID information is a good example, emergency contacts, these are not effective dated. For those, the system just shows the most current data, always. And the reason is usually that historical tracking just isn't needed for those specific records. Like you said, you typically don't need to know who someone's emergency contact was, just who it is now, unless maybe you're digging through old records for some reason. But yeah, what's really interesting is the deliberate design choice, deciding what needs the full history versus what just needs the latest info. It keeps things efficient.
Right. Efficiency makes sense. So we've got this idea of effective dating building history, but what happens next? After a change is logged, or maybe when certain conditions are met, how did these HR systems actually, do things automatically, make decisions, trigger actions? I guess that's where business rules come in.
Absolutely. Business rules are the engine for that automation. Now, for a rule to actually fire, let's say, when you save changes in someone's job information, two critical things need to be set up correctly. First, the rules-based object has to be job information. It needs to know what data it's working with. And second, that specific rule must be assigned in the right place within the system's core data structure, often called the succession data model. You can think of that model as like the HR system's DNA. It defines all the data types and how they connect. So those two conditions, correct base object, correct assignment in the model, they're non-negotiable. They make sure the rule is tied precisely to the right data, like a job record, and the right action, like hitting save. What's interesting, though, is how these seemingly simple if this, then that rules can get super complex and sometimes lead to unexpected results if they aren't designed and tested really carefully. It shows why understanding the logic is so important, not just the setup.
Okay, so it's about precision, defining the what, where, and when for these rules, almost like a digital gatekeeper. But thinking beyond the rules themselves, what about the why? Why did a change happen in the first place? Is that where event reasons fit in?
Precisely, yeah. An event reason in Employee Central, that's its job. It links a change, could be a promotion, a transfer, a new hire, whatever. It links that change to a specific predefined event, like promotion or department transfer. And this is crucial for a couple of reasons. Good reporting, obviously, but also for triggering other business rules. It basically categorizes all those employee data changes. And that categorization allows for more complex logic, like kicking off approval workflows, or maybe making certain fields appear or disappear based on the event. If you step back and look at the bigger picture, this is fundamentally how the system understands and reacts to all those different employee lifecycle events. It gives meaning to the data change. It tells the story of why.
Okay, so we've covered data history and automation triggers. How do all these different bits of data and system parts actually connect and talk to each other? Now we're getting into things like objects and associations, right? Especially something called the metadata framework, or MDF.
Right. MDF objects are super flexible, customizable data structures. Think of them as building blocks administrators can create themselves, maybe for tracking things like employee certifications or company assets assigned, things unique to the company. Now, when you want to link two of these MDF objects together, say connect a project object to a team object, you absolutely must define something called a navigation property. This navigation property is essentially the pathway. It's like telling the system exactly how to find the related information between those two separate blocks of data. It's really essential for building out a comprehensive data model. And it even affects how the user interface looks, making sure related info shows up together smoothly.
Got it. So it's the invisible link connecting different data points. Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me, connecting this to something practical, like synchronizing position data with job information data. How does the system make sure that if a position changes, say its title or department gets updated, the employee's actual job record updates automatically? Because, man, if that didn't happen, it sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Oh, it absolutely would be a nightmare without proper sync. So for that specific synchronization from the position down to the employee's job info, a special rule called a position to job info sync rule must be configured. And it has to be set up directly within the position object definition itself. This rule is where you explicitly spell out which data fields from the position should automatically push down to the employee's record when a relevant change happens. It's absolutely critical for data integrity. You need your org structure data to match your employee data. Imagine the chaos, like you said, if a position title changed but the employee record stayed the same. Reports would be wrong, communications would go awry. Yeah, not good. That sync rule is kind of a silent hero, keeping everything consistent.
Silent hero. I like that. And building on that consistency idea, how do these underlying connections and rules tie back into core HR processes? Like, let's say triggering a workflow. For example, if I update my personal information, like my home address, maybe that needs manager approval. How is that set up?
Right. Enabling workflows for changes in, say, personal information involves a couple of key steps. First, you have to add a specific workflow rule into the personal info section within that main data blueprint, the succession data model we mentioned. And second, you also need to make sure an attribute, specifically the trigger rules attribute, is correctly set within that same data model section. This basically tells the system, yes, allow rules to run when data is saved here. So it ensures the system actually checks if a workflow needs to be triggered, like for that address change approval, before the save is fully completed. It gives you that vital control for compliance and just good data governance.
Okay, it all sounds pretty technical, which it is, but how does it actually affect what the user sees and does in the system? Let's say a company creates one of those custom MDF objects we talked about, maybe for tracking mentorship programs. How can they display that information right inside an existing screen like the main employment information page without needing hardcore coding?
Yeah, that's a common need. The way you do that is by using a tool, usually called something like Managed Configuration UI. This tool lets administrators essentially embed those custom MDF objects directly into the standard user interface screens. What's really powerful about this is you can tailor the UI, add new sections, show new data, all without writing code. It kind of democratizes UI customization quite a bit. It lets the HR team or admins tweak the system screens to show exactly what information people need where they need it.
That makes a lot of sense, giving more power to the admins. Okay, shifting gears slightly, let's talk about control and efficiency in managing all this data. First up, control. Who actually gets to change the really core stuff? Specifically, what permission lets someone edit foundation object values? And maybe quickly, what exactly are foundation objects?
Good question. Foundation objects are, well, foundational. They're the core structural building blocks of the HR system. Think of them as the master list for things like your company's departments, its job classifications, pay grades, office locations, legal entities, all that core structure. The specific permission needed to let a user edit these values is typically called manage organization, pay, and job structures, or something very similar. And this permission is pretty critical because it grants the power to create, change, or even delete those foundational elements. Since so much other HR data depends on these objects being correct, It's a powerful permission. Usually it's only given to a very select group of administrators. You don't want too many cooks in that particular kitchen.
Right, protecting the integrity of that organizational backbone makes sense. Now, what about efficiency? If you need to update a lot of these foundation object values, maybe there's a reorg or you're adding dozens of new locations. How do you handle that kind of mass update efficiently? Doing it one by one sounds painful.
Oh, incredibly painful. You definitely don't want to do that manually. The standard, and by far the most efficient way, is to use the import foundation data function. This almost always involves preparing the data in a specific format, usually a CSV file, and then uploading it using the system's built-in import and export data tool. It's the standard process for any large-scale data maintenance involving these core objects. It saves an enormous amount of time compared to manual entry, and it drastically reduces the chances of typos or other human errors. It's really how organizations keep their HR system aligned quickly when the business structure changes.
Final thought for everyone listening. Consider how carefully designed and interconnected all these pieces are. The effective dating tracking history, the specific permissions controlling who changes core data, the rules automating workflows. Think about how that interconnectedness directly impacts how well an organization can manage its people efficiently, yes, but also how well it can pull out insights and adapt to change. What happens if just one of those foundational elements, one rule, one permission setting, one sync configuration is misunderstood or maybe misconfigured? How does that ripple through the system? And doesn't that just highlight how absolutely critical thoughtful system architecture is for truly strategic HR? Something to think about until our next deep dive.